Abusers who seemed to act with impunity. Children abducted, beaten and raped time and time again. Police who too often didn't stop it happening.
It was just a web of exploitation.
There have been many reports and reviews on what went on in Rotherham, where Elizabeth was raped many times by many men. Today, another report. And for some, the feeling they've been failed again.
It's horrendous. I mean, how can you have gross misconduct charges and basically be, oh well, you can have a final written warning for that. What is that compared to all the lives that they've shattered?
They didn't abuse you, but they failed to protect you.
They did, and I know this is going to sound harsh, but my opinion on the whole thing is they were complicit in my abuse and thousands of other people as well.
Back in 2014, when Operation Linden began, we were told it would be a fully independent investigation, bringing answers and accountability. Among the allegations to be looked at, that police officers protected child abusers, that victims were failed and that evidence was suppressed. It wasn't meant to take this long, but almost 8 years on, we do now have the findings. But for some, there are questions about how much accountability we have. 47 police officers were investigated under Operation Linden. None have been dismissed. The toughest sanction, a final written warning.
And the IOPC's director...
The Independent Office for Police Conduct concluded there were systemic issues, but said today there was no evidence of corruption.
What we did find was many instances where children were not treated as children. Officers did not treat vulnerable young girls with respect. They viewed them as being responsible for their own actions.
I mean, a number of women who were exploited, raped, abused, beaten when they were children have said they saw the relationships between some police officers and some of the abusers.
So we have left no stone unturned in our investigation, and we've not found what people would term as police corruption.
Lives have been ruined, a lot of lives have been ruined. You know, the consequences of those senior officers' inaction is huge.
Senior officers who collectively failed in their statutory duty to protect children, according to one of the most serious criticisms from the IOPC. Dr. Angie Heal was a drugs analyst for South Yorkshire Police in that period. A decade before the J report, she was writing reports that detailed the grooming and abuse of young girls in Rotherham.
I remember having a conversation, stood up in the office once with one very senior officer who said, I know it's all very awful what you're writing in your reports and what you're finding, but, you know, we have statutory targets to meet from the government in car crime and burglary and street crime. And I remember thinking, so if there was a mass murderer out on the street or a serial rapist that was going around raping women, on the street, you wouldn't let that go. You'd have everyone out. But there was something, it was exactly the same situation that was happening, but they just, for some reason, they chose not to understand it.
I think the challenge was at the time that the force just didn't recognise vulnerability in the same way as it does today. We let people down. It's as simple as that.
But surely police can recognise children being raped?
Absolutely, that's the case. But the challenge was at the time that the police didn't have the capacity and capability to investigate, to pull together all the information.
South Yorkshire Police say they are a different organisation now and fully accept the IOPC's conclusions. Although this programme understands they previously disputed the finding that there was a failing in the statutory duty to protect children.
We deserve justice. We deserve to see accountability, and I'm not sure we're going to get that. 7 years, nearly 8 years, for what?
Well, joining me now is Sammy Woodhouse, who was groomed by the Rotherham gang from the age of just 14. After years of abuse, she became a whistleblower, and her testimony prompted the investigation, which revealed the extent of the crimes being committed against children in the town. Sammy Woodhouse, thank you very much for coming on the programme. 8 years of investigation, £6 million cost. I just wondered what you made of today's report, having read it.
Well, I've been fighting this publicly and trying to bring the professionals to account for 10 years now. It'll actually be 10 years in just 2 months' time. I think it's absolutely disgusting, and I'm appalled the fact that no one will ever be held to account. We've had report after report, court case after court case. In my opinion, the evidence is there. You know, I lived it, I saw it. This was police corruption. And, you know, I'm tired of hearing the police force saying, well, we didn't quite understand this back then. Let's be very clear about what happened in Rotherham. Thousands of children was groomed, abused, raped, trafficked and some murdered. We was blamed, we was called liars, it was ignored, it was covered up, and they never wanted anyone to bring this to the forefront. In my opinion, it's just not good enough. And the fact that, you know, this didn't just affect us as children, it's parents, it's grandparents, you know, siblings. We've grown up now, we've got children, it's affecting them too. And we're left to pick up the pieces while police officers have retired or passed away and they've got pensions.
Well, let me just ask you on that. The police watchdog said it couldn't find evidence of corruption to just respond to that point that you put, and that, you know, the police themselves have said that there's been seismic change in the force since. But why do you think it is that not a single police officer has lost their job?
Well, majority of my complaints have been upheld, and the police officers have either passed away or retired, so can't be held to account. And I'll be honest, you know, I always try and stay hopeful that people will be fetched to account. I thought there might be one or two, but I didn't expect much. So, you know, and obviously a lot of time has passed, a lot of evidence couldn't be found. But like I say, I was there and I witnessed it. I saw what police officers was doing, and this was police corruption.
I mean, you say you're staying hopeful, but given that, you know, there were 6 officers with a case to answer for gross misconduct, 3 were allowed to retire, have you now given up hope of any of those officers being held to account, of anybody losing their job?
I don't think anybody will ever be held to account, I'll be really honest. You know, and as I say, I've been fighting this for 10 years and I've done everything I possibly can. I've testified in court against perpetrator. He was sentenced to 35 years. I've cooperated in every single investigation. You know, I've named and shamed these professionals publicly. You know, what I have to do now is kind of just focus on me and my children, try and move forward and have some kind of life. But of course, my fight will never stop for other children and survivors that have already been through it, because exploitation isn't a thing of the past, not just at Rotherham, but, you know, for the country. They are still children being exploited, still being failed. I think as a country now we talk a lot more about sexual exploitation, and we have come quite a long way, but a lot more needs to be done. And I think a lot more needs to be done around criminal exploitation. We still have children being criminalised for forced to be committing crimes, and a lot of us in Rotherham, me being one of them, have been criminalised, and we're now stuck with criminal records. So we have a lot to do. I think the difference with South Yorkshire Police now to back then is they are willing to work with us a little bit. I'm still working with South Yorkshire Police now, you know, to try and help things and get things better.
Just finally, we've spoken in the past about the terrible toll this has taken on you. I wonder if you could talk about how you've been able to rebuild your life, or at least start to rebuild your life.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm still on a journey, and I think I will be for a very long time. This is something that I think will be with me for the rest of my life. You know, it's taken a lot, but one thing that's really helped me is speaking out, you know, publicly. I know it's helped a lot of people, and, you know, that's really helped me as well. So, like I say, I've got a long way to go, but, you know, my life has been ruined for what happened to me as a child.
Sammy Woodhouse, thank you very much for your courage in speaking out and in speaking to us again today.
Thank you.
Well, the Labour MP for Rotherham, Sarah Champion, is in our Westminster studio now. Sarah Champion, you heard Sammy Woodhouse there. Clearly feels let down by this report and the fact that not a single officer has been has lost their job, to be blunt. Is this report a £6 million whitewash?
The report is a very detailed catalogue of so many failings by South Yorkshire Police over years. And what it does for me is it vindicates everything victims and survivors have said. So they have had to argue at every stage, from first trying to report all the way through to try and get justice. And this says you were absolutely right and the police were absolutely wrong. I also want to stand up for some of the frontline police who were trying to make the same cases to their senior leaders who just decided for whatever reason to ignore it.
Right. Well, let's pick up on that point, because Sammy said twice that she believed there was evidence of corruption in the police because of the contact the police had with the perpetrators, and that is documented in the report, but the police watchdog did not find evidence of corruption. Does that puzzle you?
I mean, everything about this puzzles me, to be quite honest. I don't understand how so many children, so many parents, so many community members could be reporting crime that then gets ignored. So no, it doesn't. I mean, one thing that I want to say is South Yorkshire Report had this document 2 years ago, and it's gone through a lot of backwardsing and forwardsing, and I have no idea who the senior officers were. I will probably never know. I don't know if they're still serving, and that's something which concerns me. So how much influence they've had over the final report, I can't tell. But what I can tell you is...
So the police might have watered down this report?
I would say that there is very clear changes in language that I've seen in the report from first versions, and the amount of backwardsing and forwardsing. 2 years. 2 years is a long time to go backwards and forwards and try and get a compromise. The biggest problem, though, is the report is good, the report is strong, and I commend the survivors for doing it. Where it falls down is IOPC can't enforce its recommendations. That's up to South Yorkshire Police, who haven't done anything with it. So that's where the problem is, and that's what the Home Secretary needs to address, because if it was in a school, if it was in a care home or a hospital, there are independent enforcement agencies like Ofsted that can go in, say, here is a big problem, here are the recommendations to change it, and we'll follow it up. For police, you have to complain to the police if you've got a problem, and then nothing happens.
So the complaint scheme is not fit for purpose?
Absolutely right. So I'm not damning the document. That's 8 years of survivors' work, and I'm proud that they have got their truth out there and everybody now has to listen to it. What I have a frustration with is it then goes to South Yorkshire Police, who choose not to act on it. That's where the problem lies.
So what does the Home Secretary need to do as a matter of urgency then?
Give IOPC the powers so they can actually have an enforcement capability, so they can actually do spot checks. You know, an inspector can go into a care home without announcement. We have to wait for the police to report themselves to the IOPC. How are you going to get justice in a situation like that? You're not, and that's what we've seen today.
I just want to put to you the politics of this finally, because the Conservative councillors claimed last year that widespread child sexual abuse was still being carried out in Rotherham by British Pakistani men. That was denied by an independent review. But are you concerned that these very contentious allegations are being weaponised politically?
Yeah, and it's horrible. And at the heart of this, there are vulnerable children who need protection, who need to be heard. And to make it into this political football is hugely distasteful, but it seems to be something that's become acceptable. And we really need to raise the bar as politicians. You know, I mean, how low can you get to use someone who's going through the most awful experience to try and score political points?
Sarah Champion, thanks very much.